There was a decade when one factory in the English Midlands built more bicycles than any other building on Earth. Not one of the biggest. The biggest. At its height, this single company controlled 6 out of every 10 bicycles sold in its own country, made every part in-house down to the tubing and the ball bearings, and shipped its machines to more than 140 countries. It survived 2 world wars, a general strike, and the death of its own founder without losing a single year of growth. So how does a company like that end up as a name on a downtube, assembled somewhere else, owned by somebody else, with the factory that built the empire now a car park for a university? This is the story of Raleigh, and it starts with a sick lawyer who bought a bicycle to save his own life. In 1885, a workshop off Raleigh Street in Nottingham is turning out 3 bicycles a week. 3 men run it: Woodhead, Angois, and Ellis. Lace trade money and a talent for gears. 2 years later, a Hong Kong property lawyer named Frank Bowden walks in. Bowden's health has collapsed in the Asian climate, and a doctor has told him, essentially, to ride or die. He buys a bicycle from the little Nottingham shop, tours France and Italy on it, and comes back a convert with capital. He buys into the firm in 1888. Within a decade, it is the largest bicycle manufacturer in the world. Bowden's instinct is not just to sell bicycles, it's to own every part of making them. Raleigh can't find outside suppliers who can match its quality at its volume, so it builds its own. Its own tubing, its own saddles, its own hub gears, through a subsidiary called Sturmey Archer, bought outright in 1902. By the 1920s, the company is turning out 100,000 bicycles, 250,000 hub gears, and tens of thousands of motorcycles a year. A vertically integrated machine that answers to no supplier's schedule but its own. When Bowden dies in 1921, his son Harold inherits a company that survives the Depression, absorbs rival Humber, and keeps growing while half of British industry contracts around it. Then comes the war, and the factory doesn't stop. It just changes what it's stopping bullets for. Munitions, precision parts, wartime production quietly running alongside the last of the civilian bikes. When peace returns, Raleigh doesn't rebuild. It scales. By 1979, the Nottingham Works alone can turn out 2 million cycles a year. And together with its other plants, the company is producing 4 million annually, 60% of them for export. Walk the factory floor at that point, and it still smells like the 1920s. Hot metal, brazing flux, the particular tang of enamel paint baking onto 1,000 frames an hour. Except now, there are 7,500 people on the payroll, and the line runs like a small city. And somewhere in the middle of that peak sits the single object that made Raleigh a household name outside the trade press: the chopper. Launched in 1969, styled after a chopped motorcycle and a Californian teenager's idea of cool, it became the bicycle every child in Britain asked for at Christmas, whether their parents could afford it or not. Over 1.5 million sold through the 1970s. In 1975 alone, Raleigh moves nearly 600,000 bikes in the UK in a single year, a record the company will never beat again. The chopper doesn't just sell. By some accounts, it's the thing that keeps the company out of serious financial trouble, at a moment when the wider British bicycle trade is already starting to wobble. In California, in the late 1960s, teenagers are stripping down old one-speed bikes and racing them down dirt trails. It has no name yet. Within a few years, it will be called BMX, and it will be followed by an even bigger shift: kids, and then adults, building fat-tired multi-geared bikes to ride off-road, the beginning of what becomes the mountain bike. Both trends start as garage projects 3,000 miles from Nottingham. Both are, at first, easy for a company Raleigh's size to dismiss. Raleigh does not dismiss it entirely. In 1976, it launches the Grifter, a heavy motorcycle-style bike with throttle grip shifters, aimed squarely at the same kids buying BMX bikes in America. But here is the decision that actually matters. Raleigh builds the Grifter around a 3-speed hub gear and a brazed steel frame, because that is what a century of Sturmey Archer engineering and lugged frame manufacturing has trained the company to build. American BMX makers are welding simple, single-speed, disposable frames built for jumps and crashes, at a fraction of the cost and weight. The Grifter sells respectably. It does not compete. Raleigh has answered a new kind of bicycle with its old kind of bicycle, dressed up to look new. The pattern repeats, worse, with the mountain bike. By the early 1980s, American builders in Marin County have turned a hobby into an industry, and the rest of the world's bicycle market is reorganizing around it. Raleigh, the largest manufacturer on Earth, with more engineering depth than almost any rival, is slow to move, because moving means retooling a business built for a century around lugged steel roadsters and hub gears into one built around a completely different kind of frame for a completely different kind of rider. The skill to do it exists somewhere in that workforce. The institutional will to spend the way you'd spend if you were starting from nothing does not. The numbers arrive on schedule, and they do not forgive the delay. Foreign manufacturers capture 36% of the British bicycle market by 1981. Raleigh's own domestic share, once above 60%, falls to 45%. The workforce that stood at 7,500 at the 1979 peak is cut to 4,000, then to 1,800. 3 straight years of losses later, in 1987, Tube Investments sells Raleigh to a company called Derby International for £18 million. The empire Frank Bowden built, priced like a struggling mid-sized firm, because that is what it has become. Derby's timing, it turns out, is almost accidental good luck. The mountain bike boom Raleigh missed is just entering its steepest growth curve, and the new owners ride it. But ownership doesn't undo the deeper decision. Raleigh keeps assembling in Nottingham through the 1990s, keeps losing ground on cost to manufacturers who build in the Far East from the start, and by 1999 has stopped even making its own frames. In November 2002, the production line at Nottingham stops for good. 600 jobs end with it. The Triumph Road site, the ground Bowden's company had occupied for over a century, is sold to the University of Nottingham. Assembly, what little is left of it, moves overseas within the year. In 2012, the brand itself changes hands again, sold to a Dutch conglomerate. Raleigh, the name, survives. Raleigh, the maker, does not. If your first bike, or your dad's, or your granddad's had that badge on the head tube, tell me which one in the comments. I want to know what model and what it was like to ride it. Stand on Triumph Road in Nottingham today, and there is very little to see. University buildings, a road, traffic that has nothing to do with bicycles. Close your eyes, and you can put the factory back. The smell of brazing flux and hot enamel, the clatter of frames moving down the line 2 abreast, 7,000 people who could build every single part of a bicycle within 100 yards of where they stood. Open them again, and the line is gone, and so is the reason it was ever there. Raleigh didn't lose to a bigger company or a smarter rival. It lost to a version of itself that could outbuild the world at making the bicycle it already knew how to make, and never quite found the will to build a different one in time. We didn't lose Raleigh. We lost what Raleigh chose to keep being for just a few years too long. If you want more stories like this, the decisions inside great companies that nobody outside ever hears about, subscribe. And if this one was worth 10 minutes of your time, a like helps someone else find it too.